Story of people trying to figure out who we are and what we want to achieve. And we navigate the pressures of the external, of the feelings, the emotions, the opinions of the people around us. We act like we don't care, but a whole lot of us, it's a facade and it's smoke and it's mirrors, because when no one's around, we want to fit in with groups and crowds and cliques of people. So here's the thing, y'all. I want to go through a little bit of a journey and a story with all of you, because your story, it's my story. I'm real though, and I'm raw. I don't sugarcoat nothing. I want to ask y'all a question as we get started. How many of you, as you sit in these seats and you hear my voice through these speakers, do you come from a broken, a fractured, but your biological mom and dad, your biological parents today are not together? So you come from a little bit of a broken situation. Anybody in here, raise your hand. And it's always about half of us. And see, I'm an Indiana kid, and I was born and raised in Indiana, but I come from a family of 4. And the thing about my father is, man, when I was a young man, he was a role model, my hero. He was really like this influential figure in my life. Like, I looked up to him tremendously. And the thing about my pops is I don't remember one time though, him and my mother having an argument or a disagreement. Maybe I was just naive and young and dumb, but I thought I had a picture perfect family. And when I was a kid and I wanted to start playing basketball, I didn't realize when I got a little bit older, I was only going to be 5'7"-ish. I picked the wrong sport, but I wanted to hoop when I was a kid. But we didn't come from any kind of money. We came from a very poor and kind of we didn't have a whole lot when I was a kid, but my grandma, they were kind enough and they poured a piece of concrete. And my daddy found a telephone pole and he stuck it in the ground. And we got a busted down backboard and goal. And I walk out there on this court, though, super appreciative with a heart full of gratitude, because I was on a basketball court that I never thought that I was ever going to get to experience, even in my own yard. And so I walk out there with my hero, my father, my rock star, my role model, right, my dad. And he was like, "Now, son, you put the ball in the goal." And I was probably around 9 years old. I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I know that." And we check up, and I remember like it was yesterday, the very first time that I took that ball and I shot it against my father, my dad went, "Yeah!" And dude, I was blindsided and dumbfounded. The ball went pop. And I looked at this grown man, and I'm a little kid, you're a grown dude, and I was confused. And I pick up the ball again, and I shoot it, and my dad, yeah! Dude, my dad proceeded to beat the brakes off of me. For 2 hours, I didn't watch that single ball go into that dumb goal, not one time. And after my dad demoralizing me, I walked off the court leaking snot and leaking tears like I ain't never playing again. And my mama was watching the whole time, and she came out the house and she said, "Tim, why wouldn't you let your son make 1 bucket?" I'm like, "Yeah, Dad, 1 bucket." But still to this very day, I remember every single word that he said to me. He looked at me and he looked at my mama and he looked at me with the most serious but passionate voice, and he said, "My son was never going to probably be the most gifted or the most talented or the most qualified. At the end of the day, my son needs to grow up and not compare himself to people around him. And my son needs to understand that there will always be objects and obstacles and opposition keeping him from reaching the goals in his life. I'm not giving him a bucket. He's going to learn to see the problem, identify the problem, and solve the problem, because giving up won't be in his mouth." You see, the truth of the matter is, in that moment, I just wanted to make buckets, but my dad was always trying to get me to embrace something that I promise you, I don't care what you have ever heard in the time of your life to this point. If it has not been this, it is not based in facts, and I can guarantee you this. Listen, I don't know all of your stories. I don't know everything that you've been through when it comes to home life, on the emotional side, how people have treated you, the abuses, the story, the narrative of your life that you've lived day in and day out. I don't know where you come from. I don't know what you have or what you don't have. But what I do know is this, and I don't care what anybody else has ever said to you, you're never a product of your experiences around you. You're never a product of the storms and the challenges in your environment. You're always going to be a product of what you do in the middle of your storm. What you do is what you believe. And the truth is, all of us have different stories and narratives and chapters and our own song and our own symphony of what your life has been. But the truth of the matter is, man, for me, when I was a kid, I didn't realize that, honestly, that there was 2 places that every single day I could live from. I could allow the challenges and the pressures outside of me to continue to bust the pipes, because pressure busts pipes. Or I could use the exact same pressure and use it to refine me and not be afraid of being uncomfortable and not being afraid of the challenge of the emotion that's in front of me or how somebody's treated me or what I experience, and embrace and lean into it and allow that same exact pressure that can bust pipes is that exact same pressure that can refine the diamond. And so what I've had to wrestle with for a long time when I was a kid growing up was that no matter what, we're all going to have storms. Listen, in the last 18 months in your life, when things have kind of changed and normal hasn't been really normal, and there's a lot of things that we haven't been able to control, and a lot of us have kind of been probably a little bit uncomfortable, I can promise you this, it won't be the most challenging thing that you've ever faced in your life. And the truth of the matter is, what I've learned is when I learn to lean in to uncomfortable and to pressure and to not be afraid of the moment and not shy away from feeling the feeling, but embracing it and communicating. See, for a long time, I hid from every challenge. And in that story, there was good days also. There was amazing opportunities and great relationships and beautiful parts of your story. But throughout your story of your life, you're going to have challenges and traumatic and difficult situations, but also these amazing victories and amazing moments. And I've learned through good or bad, that what's inside of me is to embrace these things. See, inside of you, I promise you, in your DNA, as we get into this today, inside of the very essence of who you are, I don't care who you are, inside of you is perseverance. Inside of you is the ability to problem solve. Inside of you, no matter what your story or storm has been or hasn't been or will be or won't be, is this thing inside of you for you to say, yes, I can. It's in you. The problem is, for many of us, we're too afraid, and we put on the social and the emotional mask, and we keep everybody at an arm's reach distance. Because communication is the very action, it's the ignition, it's the igniter, it's the very spark that activates our problem solving, our perseverance, our ability to figure things out. Communication is the actual acting agent that starts it. And too often, so many of us are too afraid to talk, and we suppress it, and we don't communicate. I learned the hard way for real, y'all. See, for me, throughout my life and your life, you will have moments of impact. Moments of impact are this: there are single events and single situations in your story that you're going to encounter. There'll be positive and negative. Times that you won the championship, you aced the test. The very first time that your toes touched the sand on the family vacation, it was a good memory. And when those things happen, you remember the details because it was positive. The people that were around you, it was a great experience. But also in those moments of impact, they come through hardships and challenges and difficulties. They can come from broken families and traumas and people saying and hurting and doing certain things to us at times. And in those moments of impact, when they're negative, you remember the people that were around you, the conversations that were being spoken. But through all of our lives, we've had these moments of impact. For me, right after the basketball situation in my life with my father, as he was always trying to get me just to lean into whatever battle was in front of me, he called a family meeting. Family meetings in my life are normally a positive experience. My dad, because we didn't have a whole lot, he would use the family meeting as the model to give us the breaking news of the shopping trip or the family vacation. We would get together and he would give us some great new reality of what our family was getting ready to get to do. I was conditioned that family meetings were a good thing. But I remember when I walked into this family meeting about 10 years old, I remember the whole setting. I sat down and my dad was to my right, my mom across from me, my sister to my left. My back was to the sink and to the stove and to the fridge. I remember the kitchen table vividly. My dad had built this table. I hated it. It was huge. It was a beautiful table, but we moved a lot and Dad never got the moving crew. He got Nate. I hated that table. The decorations on my kitchen wall were the ugliest, weird ceramic pieces of weird, faded porcelain fruit. I remember it though, because when Mom looked at Dad and Dad looked at Mom and my father began to say, Nikki, Nathan, we need to talk to you. And he began to talk about the divorce and the separation. It blindsided me because our parents don't fight. I'm not overstating it. Maybe I was just young, dumb, and naive, but I never saw my parents have a disagreement. People get divorces and split up. It didn't make sense. But as a young man, I was never allowed in my parents' bedroom. The reason, it kind of actually makes some good practical sense if you get to know me. If you really get to know me on a personal level, and even right now in a splash and a flash, you can kind of get a glimpse of it. Man, I got one speed. It's squirrel you, I go. And when I was a kid, I broke everything. And so my parents had told me the bedroom was off limits. It was a place for them to turn me off. But the truth is, as my dad got ripped out of my life and I began to ask questions behind the bedroom door, things weren't picture perfect, but that was where the verbal, the mental, the emotional abuse happened. And that's where the drugs and the alcohol happened. And that's where the knockdown fights happened. And I began to ask questions and begin to find the truth. And I remember that I looked at my father as he was leaving my life and leaving my home. I looked at the guy that was my hero at one point in time and I said, I'm never gonna be like you. I'm gonna prove to you in my life I don't need you. But I learned to do something real well that they learned to do. And I learned it from watching them. And there's a whole lot of us that are in the auditorium today. We've learned to do the same exact thing too. And well before we are putting on the physical mask, a lot of us well before we were putting on the social and the emotional mask. I've been talking about the mask for so many years, well before anything that we had to deal with COVID and the pandemic. I've been talking about the fake face, the fake smile. You know, the one that everybody on the surface, it looks like it's okay. But when no one's around, man, that smile, it's really a cry and you're screaming, but you're quiet. You're crying, but you're silent. And I learned to keep everybody at an arm's reach distance. And when everybody would ask me the question, how am I doing? It would be just fine, picture perfect. See, I didn't understand as a young man that it's okay to not be okay. And I didn't understand that when I was a young dude just dealing with emotions and feelings, that at the end of the day, that if I didn't deal with the pressure or the things happening around me properly, that pressure can bust pipes. But if I learn the tools and if I could program my life and make the default setting, when you reset your factory of setting of your phone, it goes back to a standard. If I could use at a young age the ability to default my standard of how I react to emotions and to situations and implement certain behaviors of communication, if I would just learn at a young age. But I didn't. I kept everybody at an arm's reach distance. You want to know why? Because I didn't trust any of you. And let's be real. There's a whole lot of us in here, if we were honest. How many of you, if you were 100% honest with yourself and the people around you, how many of you do you struggle with trusting people? Raise your hand. Raise it. How many of you, right? A lot of us. You want to know why? Because many of us, our trust has been broken. We were hurt on an emotional, on a mental, or a physical way, and we decided nobody is ever going to hurt me that way again. And so we set a standard of who we're going to let into our life be people that we know 100% will never make me feel the way I felt in my past. The problem with that, when we struggle with trusting people, man, we begin to almost corner ourselves from the very tool that allows us to activate just the ability to attack life and to thrive and to enjoy the journey through the ups and the downs, is the fact that you begin to kind of get lonely because you don't really let anybody really in. And the truth is, every single one of us in here, we long to want to belong. We want to be a part of something. It's natural. But some of us, we go through traumas and difficult times and situations, and our brain gets rewired where we long to belong, but we don't trust anybody anymore. So now we protect because we won't let you in. And for me, I realized throughout my life that I was setting the standard. My determination, if I could trust you or not, was always that if you would never, ever hurt me. But the truth is man, we're people, and people are people. And I've disappointed just as many people that has disappointed me. And I've realized this because somebody has broken my trust at one point in time, or just because maybe they didn't have self-awareness and they said something that was hurtful, that really kind of penetrated my heart, or maybe they disappointed me, that doesn't disqualify people from me trusting. If I know people that are for me, they believe in me, they want to see me win, that honestly, they long to see me succeed. And even though they've made mistakes, that doesn't disqualify them. I had to do it afraid and begin to allow those people in. I didn't know all of this though when I was a young man. I put on the fake face and the mask, and I isolated, and I went through middle school, and as I got to high school, slowly the pressure was beginning to build, the pressure of fitting in, the pressure of not belonging, the pressure of not wanting to deal. And I remember as that pressure began to build behind the fake face, my freshman year, my world went from being a middle school to a high school. So it went from being about 400 students to my high school is about 1,700 students. And my sister, she was 4 years older than me at the time. So I felt this pressure because I watched her go through high school, and I watched her go through the whole school system, and she was popular and well-liked and one of the movers of the shakers of the school, and what high school life was all supposed to be about. So I felt this pressure of what I was supposed to fit in like. but I didn't really let anybody in. And so truthfully, my freshman years, I was just trying to figure out life in this next chapter. I started walking away from good friends. I walked away from Jared and Jordan, the friends that cared about me, because honestly, they weren't the popular kids, and then we were getting labeled as a kind of different kind of type of kids and a crew, and I cared so bad what you thought about me. And so as my freshman year ended down and I was getting good grades still, I was almost a straight A student. I was voted as in the yearbook of going to be one of the most successful freshmen in the class. Like, I was driven. But eventually the pressure and my unwillingness to use the tools that honestly, man, are so powerful that if we don't use, the pressure can bust pipes. I remember the whispers my freshman year of, Nathan, you're not good enough, too many mistakes. The broken family, my mom got remarried, my father had kind of left and kind of got remarried, was in and out of my life, and I was battling just home life and abuse of people that weren't kind to me, and verbal abuse and emotional abuse. And I remember the point in time when honestly the thoughts of like, Nathan, it wasn't so much that I just wanted to die, but I just didn't want to deal anymore. I just wanted out. I didn't want to face anything else, another day, another minute, another moment, another hour. And the real thoughts of ending my life. You see it on social media, you hear about it over there, and this place of maybe this was the option. It wasn't, again, the fact that honestly that I just didn't want to be here. I just was done dealing, and I wanted to escape because I wouldn't let any, and it was lonely and it was confusing. How many of you in here, listen to me well, and I'm not talking about you, but I need you to own this question. But how many of you in here, do you know somebody, not you, but how many of you, do you know a friend? Do you know a classmate? Do you know somebody that this school year even has talked about or entertained the idea of? But how many of you, do you know somebody who's been struggling or contemplating about the possibility, the reality of taking their life? Raise your hand. Hold them high. And listen to me, every hand that's raised, that hand represents people in this room. And I don't know who you are that's in this room right now, but you hear me, you're not alone. I promise you, giving up is not the solution. You are not alone. And I know sometimes your feelings are intense and that emotion, but I had to learn at a young age, and I didn't learn it the right way at the first time, that my emotions can lie to me. And just because I feel alone and I feel like nobody cares about me, that feeling, it was valid. I really felt that way, but it wasn't based in facts. Even though I had a mother, and even though I had some counselors and some mentors and some friends that genuinely believed and cared about me, even though the fact wasn't that I wasn't alone, but I still felt alone. And see, I've had to learn that just because I feel a certain type of way doesn't mean that feelings are always based in facts. I used to think that because I had such low self-esteem and self-worth and self-value, I used to always think that everybody was clowning or making fun or picking on me, and every little side conversation as I walked by, every little glance or look, I'm sure that they were talking about me. And man, there was such insecurity, the feeling of being hurt and wounded, and the anger and the feeling of feeling like somebody is clowning or making fun, man, that feeling was valid. But when I went and asked the conversation about what was being talked about, and they were literally talking about the sporting event from the game the night before and the kid that fell down, and they were laughing, it wasn't even about me. But see, the feeling that I had, it was real, but it wasn't based in facts. And so for me, I've had to learn that I can control what I can control. I can't control what you say to me. I can't control how you treat me. I can't control your opinion of me. But what I can control, how I react, how I respond, and what I do. I've learned one of the biggest challenges that I had in my journey of where I was in life, and how much of the world was being exposed to me, and how much, especially with technology, y'all, like all of you in here, there's nothing that you can't jump on here, and how much the world is at your fingertips. You at younger ages are exposed to so many different systems and models and how things operate, and the feelings and emotions, and we're so opened up to just so many different things in the world. Here's what I needed you to understand at a young age. Just because as we started getting the ability to experience and to learn about different things, it doesn't mean our maturity of how we deal with our social and our emotional ability to take control of our emotions are always there. Like, you've got to be intentional to lean into moments. You've got to be intentional to slow down and to know I can take control of the anger, the rage, the feelings of frustration. I can feel this feeling, but I don't have to be impulsive. That's hard, man, because I didn't do any of that. I suppressed it and I masked it and I wouldn't let anybody in. And the thoughts of wanting to end my life, it was real. I talk about it not because I've read books about it. I talk about it because I've been there. I talk about the battle that I had with self-injury and self-harm, not because I've read books about it, because I see the scars on my hands. How many of you in here, do you know somebody who struggles with self-injury or self-harm? Raise your hand. Yep, and every hand that's raised right now, I know it represents somebody probably in this room. Listen to me. I understand sometimes the feelings that you feel, that you don't like, that you have no control of sometimes how you feel. So because you love being in control, because you don't trust anything, the pain that you inflict on your body sometimes, it makes this go away, and I can control what I feel and I don't feel. I know some of you, it's like fighting words. You don't want to admit to it because I know it was for me. Some of us, we do it in places that others can see it, and we hate to acknowledge that it's really for attention. But for some of us, at the end of the day, we feel so invisible. We have such a low self-esteem. We don't care if it's a weird look or a strange look or a different look for somebody. We just want somebody to look. And for some of us, we do it in places where no one can see. But the truth is, that mechanism, I promise you, I'm about getting to the root of the problem. And I know in that place, in that moment when we self-injure or we self-harm or we're having those real thoughts of wanting to end it. And for me, I had an eating disorder of bulimia. I had so many different mental and emotional things that I've realized that no matter when I activated one of those reactions, it never got to the root because I still felt it every single day. And then truthfully, as I walked away from those good friends and I began to rip and run with a new crowd and a new clique of kids like they weren't my people, they didn't really know me, and they brought me into their circle. But see, the truth is, hurting people hurt people. And for some of us in here, we deal with the hurt and the wounds and the pains from our past totally different. Some of us, we really battle thoughts of wanting to end our life. Some of us, we deal with self-injury and self-harm and we inflict pain. But others of us, how we deal with your hurt and your pain, man, hurting people hurt people. So you step on people with your words and you try to take your worth and take your value. See, the truth of the matter is, I got to a place where I was surrounded a bunch of people that were really emotionally and mentally and is physically abusive. We can call it bullying, but it's social, emotional, or mental abuse. Hurting people hurt people. And so I wanted to fit in, so I found maybe this is how I could deal with some of my trauma, my hurts, my pains, and I didn't like it. So literally, because I was so broken and I had such low self-esteem, I would come to school and find people that I thought were weaker than me and step on them and try to take my worth and take my value and prove to all of you that I mattered. Hurting people hurt people. So for some of you, you know who you are, the class clowns, the jokers, the one of you that act like you just don't give a rip about anything. Well, the truth is, when no one's around and the smoke and the mirrors are gone and you're not trying to put on for the crowd and the clique and the group around you, when you look in the mirror, you don't like who you see. See, this was my journey. This was my story. I was battling this place. And then they said, hey, Nathan, on the weekend, I was a sophomore. And they, hey, on the weekend, come pop the pill, take the drink, come over here, do this. No, I'm cool. I'm going to prove to my dad that I don't need him. But eventually the peer pressure is real because at the end of the day, who you surround yourself with matters. And that's why some of you have dreams and goals, but truthfully, you're surrounding yourself with the wrong crowds and the wrong groups, and they're affecting you and they're rubbing off on you. And so sometimes you got to make some tough decisions of who are you ripping and who are you running with. But for me, they were like, hey, Nathan, on the weekend, come pop the pill, take the drink. And I remember that weekend that I went and I just wanted to fit in, right? Because I just wanted to belong, even though I didn't want to let anybody in. I remember that weekend when I got high and I was drunk and I went home that weekend and I hid it from my mom and it was no big deal. And truthfully, everybody told me the dangers of drugs and alcohol. And in that weekend and in that moment, it wasn't anything bad happened. Honestly, truthfully, it kind of made me feel better for a moment because all the emotional, the hurts, the pain, some of the things that I didn't want to deal with, the real life practical situations, I thought it was going to be a way of an escape. And yet, but band-aided it for a moment. But here's the problem with substance abuse and drugs and alcohol. It's a counterfeit connection. It's a Band-Aid, and yep, it may solve it for a moment, but when you're wounded and you're dealing with traumas and issues, man, when you begin to experiment around with these situations, man, it locks onto you and it becomes your coping mechanism. And then what happens is it gives me a sense of community because I got a group or a crowd that I share the habit with, that I party and that lifestyle, so I can have a sense of belonging and that I got people in my corner, but I never have to let any of you in because it never has to get below the surface. It can just be sharing the common habit. It's the counterfeit connection. See, I went from straight A's to straight F's. This picture on your left, man, it's a real picture. Literally, I was a heartbeat away from probably a drug overdose. My life begins to spiral out of control. I go from being a freshman, voted one of the most successful freshmen in the class. By the time I'm a senior, I go from straight A's to straight F's. I get expelled because I skipped school 60 to 63 times. I go to the military at a young age, and the drugs and the alcohol just begin to consume me. And again, I'm in this place where I'm just not dealing with the pressure, right? There's always going to be external pressure, but if we don't deal with it properly, the pressure can bust pipes. And for me, because I wouldn't let anybody in, the pressure was real, and I had thoughts of wanting to end my life, and self-injury and self-harm and eating disorders and hurting people. And I would fight you in a heartbeat because, man, I was going to prove to people that I matter, but I didn't trust, so I wouldn't let you in. And drugs and alcohol, this was my life. And I go to the Army at 18, not because I wanted to, it's kind of because I had to, because I really had been kicked out of my mom's and kicked out of other people's houses. And so I'm in the military for about 18 months, and I graduated at Fort Sill, Oklahoma with honors, and I was stationed in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, 101st 3rd Brigade, Rakkasan. The problem was I couldn't give up the addiction, that counterfeit connection, and I failed a bunch of drug screens, and only by a gracious moment, I didn't get a dishonorable discharge. I got an other than honorable discharge, and I came back to my hometown, and here I was at 18, 19, 20, 21, not really making any progress because I wouldn't face the thing that honestly I was the most afraid of the most, me. And I would love to say that I figured it all out, but I was still living in all of these hurts and from these places, and a bunch of my friends went to a party, and they said, hey, Nate, you know, we're going to go out to this party this weekend. Do you want to come? And I said, let's do it. So I met my guys out there at the pool barn, and we had a bunch of beer and some drugs, and we were partying. It's the weekend. I'm 23. It's what we do, right? And when the alcohol was gone, they said, Nate, we're going to go to the bar. Do you want to come? And I'm like, well, let's do that. I was 23. Let's roll. So we go to the bar, and I had 10 more shots of alcohol, and I'm extremely drunk. And they said, Nate, the bar's about to close. We're going to go to TJ's house. Do you want to ride? I said, that's a great idea. They said, well, actually, T's not there right now. We got the keys to his house. Why don't you leave a little bit early and go get the house ready for the after party? And when the bar closes, we'll bring everybody there. I said, that's a great idea, but I'm not going to drive. So I jump on my phone and I call Priscilla. Priscilla was our friend that had moved from Alabama. She had friended the group of about 8 of us that were there that night, but she didn't come out. And I said, hey, Scylla, I need a ride to T's house. I'm too drunk to drive. Can you come get me? And she said, I'll be there. She shows up a little bit later, and I remember that by the time she had gotten there, I had bought this case of beer bottles. And as I'm leaving, my buddy Mike stops me, and Mike says, Nate, you're not driving. I said, nah, bro, she is. She's my DD. And so we walk out the bar. In the process of leaving the bar and getting to her car, somewhere in that process, I got the keys. And I talk about moments of impact, moments when I can remember every single detail. They're more vivid, they're more vibrant, they're more descriptive. We were right around the corner from TJ's house. And as I close my eyes, I can hear her voice, I can see her face, man. She said this word to me, it echoes and it rings. We were right around the corner. It was simply this moment of impact that I can always just recall, like picture memory recall. We were right around the corner. She said, tree! And then I was in a helicopter. And then I was laying in a hospital bed with 2 police officers over top of me, asking me questions. What's her name? Her cell phone was locked and her ID wasn't in her purse, and she's fighting for her life, and nobody knows who she is. And I wake up and I say, her name's Priscilla Owens, and my ankle's shattered and it's throbbing, and I don't know what's happening. And I look to my left and there's my mom. And I don't know exactly the process or why or what happened and transpired. But that moment, after the next hour, the police didn't arrest me right then and there. They, maybe because of my medical issue with my shattered ankle, or they were still trying to figure out to process what had happened that night, what charges to pursue. But they said, Mr. Harmon, we can't tell you anything about Priscilla, but you're not family. But she's not doing too well. And they let me crutch home with my mom. And I remember when I got into the car with my mom, like I just wanted my mother. And she said, Nathan, your life's about to change. You see, my sister was a nurse, so when the accident happened, she got the phone call. By the time she had gotten to the hospital, I had already been lifelined away. But she read the police report and she read the ambulance report. The police report said the amount of impact, there was no brake marks, no skid marks, no signs of me trying to stop. 60 to 63, just boom. And upon impact, my hands were on the steering wheel and it snapped the steering column and it knocked me unconscious. And my foot was on the gas pedal and it shattered my ankle. In the case of beer bottles in the back passenger seat, it flew forward. And Priscilla didn't put on her seatbelt, and she flew forward. And Priscilla and the beer, as they hit the windshield. And my mom said, there's not a lot of brain activity, Nathan. Things aren't about to ever be the same again. And you get home, and I remember back at times when I'd hear conversations like these in my schools, and they'd go through one ear and out the other, and you'd have people communicating about these topics and issues, and then you always think that happens to everybody else. And here I am, and I get home, and I call the police, and I call the hospital, but they won't tell me anything because I'm not family. But the newspaper had said 2 lifeline to Parkview Hospital, 1 fighting for their life. And so I decided I was going to stay up the entire night, and I sat and I waited in this driveway. Let her live, and I will change my life. And it was like a movie, and everything slowed down. And this white Cherokee came rolling by, and he rolls his window down and the paper gets thrown, and I swear everything goes with slow motion and it hits the ground, and I jump up and I grab it and I rip it open and I read 3 words, and I just read the words crash, victim, dies. And if I could change it 1,000,000 times over, I would. Her name is Priscilla Owens, a friend of mine. And I always say it right here in this moment. If anybody in the room has ever been affected by anything similar or of any kind of nature, I get it. And I can't be in your shoes and I can't replace, but I promise you, I am sorry. What begins to happen as I shift this talk a little bit? It's not normal. Her family, 3 days after the accident, they wanted me to contact them. What do you say? I'm sorry, forgive me? Like, what's that conversation about to look like? And I pick up the phone and I'm terrified, and I call Carolyn, the mother, and Olivia, the sister, and Paige, the niece. They're all at the house when I call. And I'm just weeping and I'm trying to say, I'm sorry. Like, I don't even have words to speak. I've never met her family before. She had moved from Alabama. She had befriended a group of us. And I'm calling this family because they wanted me to. And I'm having nothing to say. And the family says, Nathan, listen, we're numb, we're angry, we're mad. We don't know what we feel. But what we do know is in this moment, we have decided to pick love over hate. And in this moment, we're going to decide to forgive even though we don't know how. But we just want you to know that we don't think one dumb choice. And I said, no, this is my fault. You have no idea. They said, we understand. Yes, you're responsible. But we are picking love in this moment. But we're asking you to do 2 things. Don't let our daughter die for nothing, and try to make the world a better place. And I didn't even know what that meant or how or what that even could mean. I say yes, but I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense. And listen to me. Don't any of you think for one moment you can rip and you can run and you can live your life and everything just always turns out normal. I promise you, this family forgiving, it's an exception. I don't know where I would be if they didn't forgive me the way that they done. But choices have consequences. And just because the family forgave me, it doesn't mean the state of Indiana did. They sure didn't. And at 23 years old, when I should have been a senior graduating college, I found myself at 23 years old, face to face with being charged with 15 years in prison. And listen to me. It would have been easy for me when I walked into that prison to say, you know what, my life's just too tough, it's too hard, it's too difficult. I come from a broken past. I come from suicidal thoughts and tries and attempts, and I come from this place of the middle place that's so broken, and the self-injury and the self-harm and the self-esteem, and I come from traumas and verbal, mental, and emotional abuses, and I come from a lot of broken stuff and baggages. It would have been real easy to say, you know what, life's just too tough and I'm ready to give up and I quit. But you know what I remember? I remember when my dad, when I was that young man, he used to smack this basketball off my face, and he used to always tell me this line, man, and I've held on to it and I cling to it. He used to always tell me, as long as there's breath in your lungs, there's hope in your heart. As long as you're breathing. And in that moment, I began to really realize that, listen, you're not a factor or a product of your environment. No matter what your unique story or situation has been, no matter what your individual situation, you're not a product of what you've had or what you haven't had or what's happened to you or what hasn't happened to you. But we are products of literally what will we do in the face of being present in the moment. And so for me, I wrote this word, change the world, and I slapped it and I put it on the bathroom mirror in my little prison cell, and I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't know that for me, when I began to pursue every day doing the next best thing and trying to work on my behavior and my attitude and using the tool of communication and that realizing that we need each other, I didn't know that I was going to become a communicator and travel the country and the world and use voice and vocational and communication to try to move the opinions and the emotion of people to change. I just knew that I wanted to do something different. But I realized that how I had dealt with my life up to this point, it wasn't working. How did I know? I was in prison. Apparently, however I was dealing with the social, the emotional, the relationship piece of my own choices and my own decisions, it wasn't working. And so the very first thing that I had to begin to do was I remember that I looked in that mirror and I realized that the mask, the social, the emotional one, the one that doesn't let anybody in, I realized that thing was nothing more than a lie, and it was a counterfeit. And so the first thing that I had to begin to do was to get to a place where I had to do it afraid, and sometimes it was super uncomfortable, but I had to find starting those people in my circle that I knew were for me and to begin to do it afraid and begin to speak up and to speak out. See, what happened in my life over the last several years is when I stopped running and started embracing the uncomfortable situations in front of us, is I've developed these things that I didn't mean to, but I call them the 5 habits of my heart and my mind. And it's transparency and accountability and hard work and good choices and its value in people. See, transparency is powerful, man. I always say that inside of your DNA, inside of you, is perseverance. Inside of you is the ability to solve any problem that you're experiencing. But how you activate it is through communication and community. Because truthfully, none of us are an island. We're not meant to do this on our own. We won't see our blind spots. And so when I found the ability to do it afraid, which was really difficult because I had trust issues, which was really challenging because I had to be vulnerable, which was really, really challenging because I didn't like feeling certain types of ways. But here's what I learned, man, it's powerful. I need you to come here real quick. Stand up right here. Yep, come here. What's your name, my guy? James, what's up? You play sports?
Yeah.
What do you play?
Football, wrestling, and track.
Perfect, man. Here's what I need, James. Here's the power, man, of what I want to share with you. Man, James, if we were living and I was part of this community and we were kicking it and we were guys and we played sports together and we knew our stories and our journeys and we really lived life together, James, I would know your story, you would know mine. And here's the powerful thing, man. There was times in my life that I used to put on the mask and not let anybody in about the struggles. But when I finally got to the place that I was going to do it afraid and live transparent, which means this, kind of see-through, the people around me, I allow them to see the real me, not the one that I portray, but they really know some of the difficulties and the emotional stuff and just life. But here's what happens. When I began doing it afraid, James, and I began using the resources of the people in my circle, bro, it's not that I needed you to have the epiphanies. I didn't need you to have every answer to every question. Here's what I needed you to do. See, the power of communication is what activates inside of me problem solving. Every good math teacher will say this: how do you solve the problem? The first thing you got to do is identify the problem. And communication, honestly, is this power of speaking up and speaking out. So James, when I started sitting next to you and we started sharing, it wasn't that you were giving me all the epiphanies. You were just listening and I was starting to problem solve. And yes, you would encourage me. And yes, we would begin to feel a camaraderie. But here's the thing. As I got the boldness to share about my stuff, James, you started finding courage and you started sharing about your stuff. And you know what I really learned in this journey of facing my fears and getting to a place where I don't give one rip or one iota, one flip what any of you think about me? Because my value doesn't come from you. A long time I wouldn't talk about the hurts, the habits, the pains, the emotional abuses, the traumas, because I was so concerned of what others would think. But when I got to the place of just doing it afraid and you started finding the courage because I was showing courage, I realized something, that every single one of us in this room, every single person that you see living through highlights on social media, every single person, every business person, I don't care who's you've seen in front of your eyes, we are all beautifully broken some way, somehow, man. We've all got stuff. And when I got to that place of being so comfortable there, what happened, James, is I started being transparent. But here's what really the power is this, bro. How many of you are there areas in your life that you know you want to change, you should change, you need to change? There are real behaviors or maybe choices or crowds or certain ways that you live your life or attitudes or behaviors. There are things in your life that you know you should change, you want to change, you need to change, but truthfully, nothing ever changes. How many of y'all in here, right? Am I the only one? Yeah, you want to know why? Because change is extremely uncomfortable. And no one wakes up and says, today I want to be uncomfortable. No, we run back to being what we've always been. That's real. And what I learned, bro, is this, man. Let me see your hand. I want you to get tough, man, like you're playing ball. Watch this, man. Listen, James, here's the thing, bro. When I started being transparent and I started opening up, transparency and accountability. Accountability, James, when I was a kid was like someone's going to tell on me, someone's looking to write me up. Like accountability was a cringe word. Like I don't want to be accountable because that means someone's watching me. What I realized, James, is this, man. See, you can't make me change. As we live life and we're transparent and you're in my circle, see, you can't make me be better and you can't make me be worse. But when that emotion of, man, that fear of failure, that fear of wanting to take off, get tough. Don't let me move, man. And what would happen when I had that emotion of fight or flight and I take off, and we start living life. And you can't make me change, but I begin using this thing called accountability and transparency where you become an anchor. You can't make me be better, but you can't make me run either. But what you can do is that when you know me as your guy, as your friend, when you know the heart that I'm trying to overcome this fear or this disappointment or this behavior, and that emotion gets real and there's that fight or flight and I want to take off, you can hold me. You become my anchor. See, power in our DNA of perseverance and our ability to problem solve and the tenacity and the grit that's inside of all of you, it gets activated by communication, because in community, man, it begins to stir something inside, deep inside of you, because you're not meant to be an island. You're not meant to suppress. It's okay to be vulnerable. There is freedom in my vulnerability. Thank you, man. Have a seat. Give him a round of applause. And so here I was. Real talk, y'all. I got to the place where I just started doing it afraid, and it didn't change everything overnight. No, man, I still had my issues. And it would have been real easy to say, you know what? Next week, next semester, next year, that's what I'm going to face and change a behavior. But right there in the middle of my environment, I realized that I was going to be transparent and accountable. But here comes the truth. Hard work works. Make good choices, good things happen. And here's what I mean by that. There's never a wrong time to do what's right. What I feed will grow and what I starve will die. That's why I always tell every single person, I don't care how young to how old you are, what is your why? What are you throwing against the wall and seeing what's going to stick? I don't like calling them dreams and goals, but what's the plan? Their dreams, their goals, their plans. What are the things that you're passionate about? I don't care how much your struggle's been. I don't care how much trauma you've had to experience. What you feed will grow and what you starve will die. I need you to begin to throw things against the wall, things that you're passionate about, and say, today, I want to do the next thing that brings that thing closer to me. I don't want to make the choices and decisions that push it farther away, because hard work works. Make good choices, good things happen. And the truth of the matter is, your environment doesn't dictate the fact that if you do the next right thing, hard work and good choices, in spite of your environment, will open up doors for you to succeed and to get glimpses of the next step, the next purpose. The truth is, in your culture right now, at your age group, some of us see it as a negative thing, man. I see it as opportunity. So many right now are so lazy. We talk about it, we post about it, but nobody wants to self-regulate. Nobody wants to look in the mirror and say, yes, I can, and just apply themselves. You're living in right now in a group, in a space that every single one of you, if you will just apply yourself and to begin to literally take your eyes off the distractions and to do the next right thing or whatever it is that you've thrown against the wall, I promise you, by default, you will separate yourself from the crowd, because others talk, others post, but nobody wants to roll up their sleeves and just do. And so for some of you, you've got goals and dreams, but man, you're ripping and you're running with crowds of people that aren't about the right, and they're causing you to compromise. And that's just real. And so for me, in the middle of prison, I started working on my behavior and my attitude. I began to realize that I wanted to be a communicator. And so every single day in the middle of my struggle, is this choice, is this helping me bring my dream closer, or is it pushing it farther away? Because the truth is, all of you that have a license up in here, and when you look in your rear view mirror, it says the words, objects in the mirror are closer than things appear. And for a lot of us, you're like, yep, next semester, next year, in a couple years, I'm gonna work. No, right now, what you do is what you believe. And truthfully, on the mental and the emotional side, when I started thinking about dreams and goals and plans and things that I were throwing against the wall and seeing what was going to stick, I wasn't focusing on the pity and the struggle and the hurt and the pain. Not that those feelings aren't valid. But I promise you, what you give away is what you get to keep. And here's what I mean. You see, I started working on transparency and accountability and hard work and good choices. Why do I always say that your environment does not dictate your opportunity, but what you do does? Because I was incarcerated in prison, but year 2, 3, and 4 into my prison sentence, the first 3 years actually, I was working on my behavior, my attitude. I was working on me. I wasn't making excuses. Good choices will always create opportunities no matter where you're at in life. I started leaving the prison in street clothes while I was in prison. They started a program. It was crazy. I was selected, and I would leave the prison in street clothes, go out to the Division I colleges all across the state of Indiana, and conferences and high schools and different corporations, and I would live life and I would talk. The first 3 years in my prison. Why? Because our environments do not dictate us. It's what you do in the middle of your storm. I got released 11 and a half years early. A governor of Indiana said, this young man's more effective out there than he is in here. And I came to my hometown. But can I be honest? How many of you in here, have there been people in your life that honestly, man, you were serious about changing, you were serious about something, and you went to share with them, and you were excited because it was a real moment for you, and you were met with discouragement, you were met with defeating words, and you walked away from them, and you're like, why should I even try to change it? Nobody believes in me. Anybody? Yep. You know, the truth is, I used to fall for that trap over and over and over again, but this time it was going to be different. I knew I was different.